It was pretty gnarly down here. I mean, you still, all I remember is like you still go to school, you still, had your regular life. But then from time to time, war stuff would happen. So like it would be normal to watch like tanks and stuff roll down the street, just like watching the jeeps and stuff. I remember as a kid, we used to play like with little like the plastic like soldiers. Like to us, it was just cool. Like we didn't understand what was really going on, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember I have a memory when I was living in we were living with my grandma, and she lived in a place called Ilo Vasco, which was like really hard hit by the war. And I just remember the power would go out, and everyone would like go into like the room with the least windows. And that's because when the power would go out, they'd usually like cut it when there were skirmishes and stuff happening, and you'd hear the pa, 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 like the gun battles going on in the distance. And then I just remember as kids, like to me, it was kind of like a fun thing because you don't understand what's going on. So the kids are all like playing, and
I could imagine huddled up in a room having
and there's
fun.
candles and stuff, and you're just running around, and the parents are all like hushed and like kind of whispering to each other.
Yeah, they take the burden of the stress on, right?
Yeah, because what you didn't want to have happen is like have a soldier or have like a guerrilla or whatever trying to get into the house, right? And then try and start stuff like if they're being chased or whatever and they chase them into the house, then someone could get hurt, someone could get shot or whatever. And then I remember hearing like the droning of like the planes, like I remember that, and then hearing bombs drop and it would shake like a little mini earthquake.
Wow.
So, but as a kid, it was just like normal, right? So you didn't know that it was not normal, right? Until when we moved to Canada and you start realizing, oh, there's no like bombs here. There's no like, threat of people killing each other and everything.
And your parents are probably less stressed out as well. And
yeah, exactly. And I think honestly, if I look at it objectively, I think part of the reason that I'm a Bitcoiner and, I research politics and like how money and everything works was probably because of that experience. Like it always stuck with me as a kid. And I wanted to understand why was El Salvador going through this war, right? And then you research, you read, you start learning like the different forces and that, it was a proxy war in essence. What's going on in Ukraine is basically what happened in El Salvador.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
So from my understanding, it was like the Russians, the kind of communist
Cuba,
faction.
Russians, yeah.
And then the U.S. got involved.
The U.S., yeah.
And so it was basically that war against communism happening here in El Salvador.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you look around, you could just say that the U.S. won because now there's Pizza Hut here, there's McDonald's, there's like all that stuff. We have the U.S. dollar as a legal tender. So it didn't happen all at once, but basically over time, like you see the effects of the winning side, right?
Sure.
Like maybe if the U.S. wouldn't have won, it would have been like Cuba here. I don't know.
Yeah, that is an interesting thought. So at what age did you go to Canada?
7 or 8 or something like that.
Wow. So it was, you had a formidable years spent here in El Salvador during the war. So I could imagine how that impacted you. Yeah.
Yeah. I did grade 8 there. And then the war had ended in El Salvador, like in 92, I think. And in 94, my parents decided to move back because they missed El Salvador, right? And we drove down. We drove from Vancouver all the way to El Salvador. So driving through the States was easy and it was fast, except the engine melted in Nevada.
Yeah.
And then we had to get a new engine because the car was made for like snow. Engine melted, got a new engine, drove down. Mexico was super difficult. I don't know if it's different now, but driving through Mexico back then was just insane. You had to give bribes and stuff like at every stop. It was crazy. And then we eventually made it to El Salvador and then reestablished our life here. And I started going to school here. I did my high school at a place called Colegio Santa Cecilia, which is like, it was like an all boys Catholic school. But it's really well known, like really good programs and, fairly strict. But the students that come out of there, they're usually like, well
Well
educated.
educated, yeah.
Yeah. And so I studied as my elective electronic engineering was what I studied. That's where I learned more about, how electronic devices and stuff work. And at that time, El Salvador was mainly focused on training people for rebuilding a country, right? So construction, that's why electronic engineering, there was electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, that sort of stuff. Now there's more options and more opportunities, but at the time that was it. And then by the time I got to university, I did 1 year of university here at a place called La UCA, the University of Central America. And I felt like, because I had been studying computers all throughout this whole time, I felt like I could be teaching the class. Do you know what I mean? Especially with computers, because it's like the classes were like 2-3 years behind on the technology, and because I was in it, I just knew the latest stuff, right? And so one of the things I was doing then as a hobby was I was coding my own 3D engine to make video games still, because I really love them. So I made a 3D engine from scratch where you can have like polygon based 3D stuff. But I coded all the math and everything myself, like learn how to multiply matrices together and plot points like from 3D to 2D and all that sort of stuff. And I was writing text files and plotting the vertices like manually to create boxes and different shapes and stuff to load into my program for my game. And I was getting tired of doing that, and that's how I started looking for 3D like design packages. And I found a piece of software called True Space. Started using that to create like objects and loading them in, and that would eventually lead me to doing visual effects for film and TV.
Okay. So when did you come back full time here to El Salvador? You said that was your first trip back, right?
And then I moved back to Canada in like 1999, 2000.